I have to apologize for this? Yeah, I suppose so. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for those of us who are here. Thank you for those of us who have made a special effort to leave other events behind to join us so that we could be quorate. We are starting a little bit later than scheduled, but nevertheless, we are starting. We have for those we're expecting to see somebody else in the chair, I'm covering for the chair who has tendered his apologies. Any other apologies, please, my clerk?
Councillor Aidelli, Burt MacDonald, Nick Williams, Mbang and Gardner.
Thank you very much. And we did have apologies for late arrival who are here now, so thank you very much. Are there any urgent business? I wasn't told of any, so assume there isn't. No. Are there any declaration of interest considering the item on the agenda this evening? No, there isn't. Thank you all very much. There are minutes of the last meeting, which was held in May 2024, of the full licensing committee as opposed to the subcommittees. Are we happy to agree those minutes? Those of us that was there, I was there, I'm happy to. Yeah? Okay, lovely, thank you very much. So I will sign that. I'll do that now, yeah? So thank you very much. Right, now the substantive item that we're here for this evening is the Gambling Act. We are being presented with the decision of adopting the revised gambling policy. So first of all, before we consider that, let me move to the presenting officer, which is Officer Ian Andrews, Head of Trading Standards, Environmental Health, Commercial Services, and he's also here with his manager, the licensing manager, Jane Dyer. So over to the both of you to just give a brief introduction to this before we go to any potential questions. Thank you.
Good evening, thank you. What we're presenting, first of all, is a policy review which we're obliged to do. This is something that we can't negotiate. It's something that we have to do once every 3 years. But we have sought to make changes which are going to put the policy in a strong position going forward. We were quite pleased with the consultation responses that we got, and we have refined the content to, where possible, improve the amount of signposting information for those people who may be affected or at risk of the effects of gambling itself. And we are proposing to remove the letter drop component of this policy. Now, the letter drop is not a statutory requirement. It's something that we've operated historically. We're proposing to remove that, and that didn't attract any real negative comments as a result of the consultation exercise.
That's it, lovely. Thank you very much for that. The Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Enforcement is with us this evening. Did you want to say anything at all? That's Councillor Taggart-Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to thank officers for putting forward this strategy, for going through the consultation. A lot of this is around meeting our statutory requirements. It is a requirement to update our gambling strategy every 3 years. There isn't any, as Mr. Andrews has said, there isn't a substantive change here, but it is ensuring the correct balance with our licensing duties to prevent disorder, protection of vulnerable individuals, with the environment of ensuring that gambling is conducted in a fair way. We did review the consultation results from residents. Most of those actually fell outside of the scope of what would be within the powers of this strategy. And there was just a few amendments from some of the stakeholders which have been taken into account of. Other than that, I would say it's not a huge substantive change from the last strategy.
Lovely, thank you very much for that. Let me move to my fellow colleagues around the table now. Are there any questions? Does anyone want to ask any questions of this? No? No? Councillor Sullivan, go on. Be brave. No? Okay, I've got a question, and it's possibly to to help residents, because I do know that part of their concerns is possibly not necessarily that the establishment is there, but the antisocial behaviour nuisance factor that develops around that, and what are we doing to better safeguard the quality of life that they have to live with. I mean, another way of looking at it, I suppose, is how are we supporting these gambling establishments, which include the local betting shops and so on in our high streets, to be more responsible to prevent some of the antisocial behaviours that occur and to mitigate the impact it has on the local community. Thank you.
So I think, Chair, I would point to the Integrated Enforcement Initiative, which we have in place as a good vehicle by which to respond to any specific concerns. From a less street-based perspective, I've highlighted that we have a very good working relationship with the Council's public health team, and that touches upon not only the harms that can be caused by gambling, but also aspects of the licensing policy itself outside the remit of this report, but I just offer that an example of how we work with them in a very intelligent and data-driven way. We also are working in conjunction with colleagues in community safety and with the police. So where there are particular issues regarding premises, there will be a multi-agency and multi-team discussion, and then officers from within the licensing team will be reaching out to the business, potentially reaching out to other parties in the scenario to try and identify what are the factors that we can exert any influence over, and how can we look to improve things, bearing in mind the restrictions of the policy and therefore the limits of our enforcement options at that time.
Yes, thank you. And that will be predicated on the residents or whomever feels it's impacting on them reporting, isn't it? Do we have a link to actually report licensing or gambling concerns online?
We don't have a specific form. It would either be done through the Council's main contact centre or by email direct to the team or through a casework route. It'll be one or more of those.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Nothing arising for anyone? Thank you.
Let me just make one comment. When I read through the report earlier today, I was quite struck by the fact that we weren't really invited to make much comment. We were pretty well, from the consultation responses and from the officer responses, all seemed to be quite comfortably, adequately dealing with all the questions that were raised. And I can understand, well, there's two minds thinking, do I need to bother going? This is a fait accompli, in effect. So I presume we're only here just to rubber stamp it so it goes to council. Yet, you know, thinking about it for some time, but I mean, this act, is there any prospect of it being reviewed? I mean, as I understand it, goes back to 2005. Most of what, you know, we want, or comments that people make are outside of the Act, or the Act doesn't apply, or they restrict them from doing it. So I think, well, what is the point? But there are, you know, we have Bet365, we have Betfred, we have all these people plastered on football shirts, on advertisements, kids walking around with Bet365 or whoever. It just seems to me that since 2005, the smartphones and the internet have actually completely changed the world of gambling away from the bookies and all that. And I think, well, you know, we're just whistling in the dark here. There needs to be more of an attack on gambling nationally than we can manage locally. I don't know whether that's relevant. I'd be interested in your comments.
Okay, did you want to come in first? Councillor Taggart-Ryan, thank you.
Thank you. I think this strategy is focused on licensed premises. So within the powers of the Gambling Act, this is quite a limited area in which we have scope to change policy direction substantively. There wasn't a huge sense that residents want a particular change through the consultation. There wasn't a huge demand for a more permissive or strictly more prohibitive licensing scheme within our gambling. There wasn't a demand for new casinos or particularly for new bingo halls. We didn't see that coming through. Most of the concern was about the minutiae of managing disruption around a premises and vulnerable people, which is what the scope of this exercise, this strategy is about. I understand, I think the Gambling Act is likely, and the Licensing Act is likely to be amended quite shortly due to Martin's Law coming through. So there will be more restrictions on premises that hold events. So that's slightly different. But that would be an amendment that's coming up probably in this Parliament. The other thing I would say is under Councillor Lollivar's portfolio, there is also the addiction strategy coming forward. Now, that will be looking at alcohol, drugs, and gambling as problem behaviours in the health sense. So some of those concerns, I think, are probably better placed within that strategy rather than this one. It's terrorism, prevention of terrorism in premises, problem premises bill. I believe it's at committee stage in the Commons.
Yes, so organisers of events, Councillor Sullivan, it's organisers of events will have to take anti-terrorism requirements into concern. It's that sort of thing. Did officers want to come back in relation to this at all? Or is that enough?
Only to say, really reflect what you've said already, remote gambling is not within the ambit of this policy. It's only gambling premises. And there are changes afoot. The government are looking at them at the moment, but they haven't come through yet. So we can't take those into account until they become law. But when they do, we can review this policy at any time, and it may well that we will do within the 3-year period to reflect the changes in the legislation.
Lovely, thank you for that. Is that our question? Lovely. Any other questions? No, that's it. So are we minded then, or are we happy, to commend to full council, which is where the final ratification will happen, this revised policy statement of the gambling policy? We're happy? Agreed? No dissent? Lovely. Thank you very much. That's a unanimous agreement. Thank you all for your time. And once again, thank you for those of you who made a special effort to detour and get here so that this meeting can go ahead. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.